There are dozens of brand new relic perks added with the Deep of Night update, and a lot of these are just upgraded versions of relic perks that you did get in the regular base game, but for the most part, the deep relic perks tend to just be more powerful. But for today, we are going to go ahead and rank all of them, except for the character-specific perks. I am going to make a separate video going over these character-specific perks, because there is like a lot more that I want to talk about when it comes to those ones. Whereas for this video, I just want to talk about all of the universal perks, or just like the relic perks that are going to be good for any single character. Now, this isn't going to be a traditional ranking. I am going to separate it into 3 separate tiers. I'm going to have like the borderline useless tier. I'm going to have like the average tier, or like at least it actually does something tier. And then we're going to have the tier of relic perks that are actually good. Now, to start off with, I actually want to talk about Dormant Power helps discover X weapon type. Now, this isn't tied towards any single tier at all. I'm actually going to separate this from the ranking list. And the reason being is because this perk can either be like the best one for your build, or it can quite literally be like the worst perk that you can get. Because there are circumstances where you might find some like amazing affinity attack power up boosting stuff for like your recluse, and it comes alongside Dormant Powers discovers whips. And in that instance, it's pretty much a debuff, because what this perk actually does do is that it overrides the weapon type that you're more likely to find with this new weapon type. So a majority of the time, this is very bad, but there are some circumstances where I do like to use this. I do like to run Dormant Powers discovers Katana with my Iron Eye, because I do like playing melee Iron Eye a lot more than range. I just think melee is more powerful. And also, I do like to run fist weapons on the Wilder, because Wilder just gets the most damage with fist weapons. You can do a very similar thing with that in the Duchess as well, but I do think it synergizes better with the Wilder. And I also have a Great Axe one on like an amazing relic with my Revenant, because I do like to run the Strength relic perk with the Revenant with all of my builds. But getting into the ranking itself, starting off strong, we're going to talk about the increased consumable damage. This relic perk right here can boost the damage of your throwing knives, pots, and perfumes by up to 35%, which, like, who cares? You can only hold a handful of these things anyway. They don't even do that good of damage even with this relic perk active. You're going to miss half the projectiles that you throw. And even if you do find some small niche uses for these projectiles, it's not really worth building around. But staying on the consumables, the HP regeneration from the boluses, it doesn't really add much for you either. It is only like 80 more HP when you do consume a bolus. But same thing applies. You can only hold up like 2 at a time for every single item slot. And your item slots tend to be pretty valuable, especially once you get later into the game. It's just not really worth the relic slot. The item possession at the start of an expedition, this lets you start off with any perfume or wondrous physic, which I don't think I have to describe. Having a whole dedicated relic perk to just give you one just finite item that's just going to have like one use case that you typically want to be able to save for like a boss fight anyway, and you can probably just end up finding some like useful consumables for cheap. I just don't really find a use for this thing at all. The HP regeneration from thrusting counterattacks is also very mediocre, because one, counterattacks are very rare to come by, which if you don't know, if you hit an enemy throughout their attack animation with piercing damage, it is going to count as a counter hit, which is inherently going to do bonus damage. And with this relic perk equipped, it is going to give you 3% of your health back. And the amount of times you actually land a counter attack in this game is pretty far and few, and 3% health is just not enough. Now, you can actually somewhat consistently proc this perk with the Iron Eye and using a bow, because bows do count as piercing damage, and there are plenty of circumstances, especially in teams, where you might hit an enemy throughout an attack combo, but this thing just needs to get dramatically buffed to have like 10% health back with like bows, and maybe 20% of your health back with like weapons, and even then it still wouldn't even be broken. Sleep and Madness being procced in the vicinity, giving you a damage boost, is also very niche and not worth building around, because there aren't many things that you can actually do to proc yourself with Madness and Sleep already, unless you're actually using those specific relic debuff or curses that have you take that particular status effect build up, but it's just not worth building around, because it's pretty risky just having yourself get procced with Sleep or Madness in the middle of a boss fight, and just getting like a little bit of a damage boost, like 10% damage, is just not worth it at all. But speaking of status effects, the status effect resistances are kind of borderline useless. I'm going to put it at the top of this tier, because it can be useful if you have it in combination with like those curses that do make you take particular status effect buildup. So if you have a perk that gives you taking damage causes rot buildup, and that happens to come alongside some improved rot resist, you can't really go wrong, because these status effect resistance perks can come in any single slot, and they're just always going to come in combination with like alongside some other powerful stuff sometimes. But getting into the next tier of like the middle of the pack, like at least it does something tier, pretty much all the perks that I'm going to talk about, I'm only going to really care to run if it comes in combination alongside some other really useful stuff. But to start off with, I want to talk about everything that gives you a boost when you clear out a point of interest, like more arcane when clearing out a ruin, the stamina on the camp, the runes at a fort, and I will talk about the HP increase at a great church as well, although I do consider this one to be the best by far because it is a 5% HP increase for every single time you clear out a great church. Now, percentage health increases are only really going to be good if you have it alongside like a tanking build or a character that has a lot of health already. Otherwise, it's not going to really be that big of a difference. Like 5% HP on someone like the Revenant is probably not even going to be the equivalent of like +3 Vigor perk. And the fact that you have to go out of your way to clear out a great church or a cathedral can be a downside because it is going to be RNG reliant. Some games you probably might not even clear out a single one, but they are going to be pretty easy to clear out compared to a lot of the other points of interest, like a camp, for instance, which that only ends up giving you stamina, which stamina isn't really going to be like the most amazing perk to run, except if you're talking about like the Guardian because you want to be able to like block more often, but it still is only going to give you a 7% increase to your stamina bar. So it is okay if you have it in combination with other things, but I wouldn't really plan to build around it. Same thing with the arcane up at ruins. It only gives you 4 arcane for clearing out a ruin, and having more arcane doesn't really just do much for you because there aren't many weapons in the game that actually have their damage scale off arcane. Because yeah, status effects do scale off arcane, but it's just going to be the build-up of it. And having 4 more arcane, you're not going to really notice much difference at all. Now, when it comes to the runes and item discovery when clearing out a fort, this one can be okay. It's 5% more rune gain and roughly around 15 more item discovery, which it can be pretty good, but 5% more rune gain isn't anything too crazy by any means. But once again, none of these perks actually have any downsides, so if they come in combination with other really good stuff, you can't really go wrong. And speaking of things that you can't really go wrong with, having increased maximum FP or having the perks that reduce FP cost, these are obviously going to be pretty situational because it is like character dependent. Like they're going to play very well with someone like the Duchess or the Revenant. Now, I don't think these FP relics are going to be as good as the one that give you more FP based on clearing out a Sorcerer's Rise or having 3 or more seals or staves equipped. But you actually can't get those relic perks in your deep relic slots. So if you actually did want to maximize your FP, these are going to be your best bet. And these can come in combination with things like affinity attack power up +2. So if you manage to have those 2 things together, that's pretty much going to be a god roll. But with how easy it is to come alongside Starlight Shards, especially if you are in teams, I wouldn't prioritize having more FP over damage. And the same thing could be said about having more stamina as well. I think stamina recovery is more important than having a larger stamina bar. Although in this game, things consume a lot of stamina. So having a larger stamina bar can be very good. Although this max stamina increase is only going to be a percentage. So it's only going to really benefit characters that actually have lots of stamina to begin with, like the Guardian. But also keep in mind that this is always going to come alongside a curse or a downside. And this max stamina might not even make up for it. Now, next I want to touch on the consuming a grease just gives you a physical damage increase, which if you have the +2 version, it is going to give you a 20% damage boost to your physical damage for 30 seconds. So essentially with this relic perk active, every single time you pick up a grease, you can kind of just see it as having another exalted flesh, but then it's going to be more abundant. So you can just keep stacking up on them. And any single time that you do go up to a boss, you can pretty much get 20% more damage. Now that is assuming that you do have pure physical damage, which a lot of the weapons in this game and a lot of the good weapons in this game tend to be split damage, and you're not going to really be benefiting as much. And it can also be pretty inconvenient to constantly stack up on greases, and you might want to have like other different types of consumables there instead, but it definitely can be very beneficial throughout your expedition. Now these next 3 perks that I am going to talk about are definitely going to be like the best in this tier, starting off with improved sorceries and incantations. Now, the +2 version can actually boost your damage by 10%, which that is just fantastic. If you actually wanted to know for a comparison, if you had those specific spell school boosting buffs like Crystallian Sorcery or Carrion Sword Sorcery, Dragon Cult Incantation buffs, those are 12% more damage. And the funny thing is, both of these things can actually come on the exact same relic. Now, you might be wondering, why is this not going to make it to the top tier? And that is because that affinity attack power is typically just better, because affinity attack power +2 is also 10%, and that's going to extend to all affinity attack power. That's going to include your weapons, and it's going to include both sorceries and incantations too, not just the one. Now, when you are fighting with like physical damaging spells, then that can be a bit of a downside. So if you have things like Bestial Sling or Aspect of the Crucible Tail, Rotten Breath, Scarlet Aeonia, those aren't going to get boosted, but those spells are very far and few to begin with, that you're almost always better off just having affinity attack power on anyway. But if you can't find affinity attack power and you have like improved sorceries or incantations alongside some other powerful stuff, then yeah, go ahead and run it. Elemental damage negation is obviously extremely important, especially in this game mode. Now, physical damage negation is typically more important because more enemies just typically do physical damage more so than elemental damage, but the Night Lord bosses always end up coming alongside some amount of elemental damage, and these tend to be your biggest threats, especially in trios. But I want to talk about the specific elemental damage negation boosts. So the ones that actually have specific, so like fire damage negation, lightning damage negation, those specific ones I don't really care for as much because it's only going to cover the one element. And when you're doing an expedition, you're going to be coming across multiple different elements. Now, yes, you can still stack up on a particular damage negation for the particular Night Lord boss, but it's just not worth having like 10 different builds just for every single boss when you can just stack up on affinity damage negation and just cover the entire thing. Because the difference between affinity damage negation +2 and like a specific damage negation is only going to be a 4% difference. Now, do keep in mind that affinity damage negation +2 is always going to come alongside a downside, whereas the regular ones aren't going to come alongside a downside. But even then, I still would rather look out for those ones instead, especially because it doesn't have to necessarily be +2 as well. But the best perk of like this middle tier section is going to be Flask Restoration Increases. This perk is just going to give your flasks just 10% better heals, which is pretty good. And with how important things like damage negation at full HP are, a perk like this can just be a bit more consistent at keeping you at full HP. But when it does come to survivability, I do think some other things are just better out there, like having more health. Because when you have more health, you inherently just get better flask restoration, because flask restoration in this game is percentage based. So the larger HP that you have, the more that you're going to heal. So having more HP is essentially going to be doing more flask restoration and giving you more max HP as well. Okay, now getting into the top tier, the stuff that's actually really good to run. First, I want to cover the guard counter increases. Now, this one is obviously only going to really be specific to the Guardian. You can make a build around this with the Executor as well, but it is mainly for the Guardian because the +2 guard counter buff can give you a 26% damage increase, and these will stack with themselves as well. So you can actually have multiple +2 guard counter buffs, and they're all going to stack. And you can just get ridiculous amounts of damage. So yeah, this is definitely like the best perks to run with the Guardian. If you find these alongside like affinity damage negation, you pretty much have a god roll. But speaking of which, we might as well talk about damage negation as well. All of them are really important. I think physical damage negation is probably going to be the more reliable one because more enemies just do physical damage. But once again, when you're playing the Guardian, something like affinity damage negation is more important because your shield already has a 100% physical block. If you wanted a tanking based Guardian build, just stacking up an affinity damage negation is probably going to be more important than having things like more HP. But things like more HP you can never really go wrong with. As I mentioned earlier, when clearing out the great churches or the cathedrals giving you more health, they're going to be great, but they might be a bit too RNG heavy. But having the increased maximum HP buff is going to be a nice 10%, and all these are going to stack together as well. But once again, keep in mind, being that it is a percentage increase, it's going to do a lot better with characters that already have a lot of HP. So like having just one increased maximum HP perk alongside like the Revenant and thinking you're actually going to really tank a lot of stuff, you're going to have to pair this alongside some other vigor boosting stuff. Otherwise, just stack up on damage negation instead. Now next, I want to touch on all of the perks that increase your ultimate art regen. All of these are in the regular base game relics, but now they just have +1 variations, which are obviously just going to be more powerful, and they will stack together as well. Now, having enemies killed giving you more art charge, I definitely think is the most powerful one here, because it can give you like 7% of your ultimate back by just killing one enemy. But if you're playing someone like the Guardian, then the blocking is going to be extremely powerful. I like running the critical hit one with the Wilder, specifically in solo, because his ultimate pretty much always results in like a stance break, which is going to give you a critical hit, and it's going to be like 10% of your ultimates already back again, and you can get it back extremely quickly, which I actually have a relic like that alongside my critical hit build of the Wilder, and it's really fun to play with. But yeah, all the ultimates are really powerful, and they can be really clutch in many circumstances, so you can definitely never go wrong with a perk like that. Also, the perks that you can never really go wrong with will be the ones that give you more damage when facing a status effect afflicted enemy. Now, this can extend to Poison, Rot, and Frost. rot. Now, I think the rot one is going to be the least valuable because it is the least common one and you can't really start off with rot either. But having poison and frost, especially poison, is going to be extremely valuable because they can give you up to a 20% damage boost, and the +1 can actually give you a 16% damage boost, and those can actually stack together. Now, the 2 +2s will not stack together, but the differing levels will actually stack. And is having the potential to do like 40% more damage to a target is obviously amazing. That's pretty much the equivalent of an Evergel relic with all 7 Evergels cleared. But like the obvious catch is that the enemy has to be poisoned. But with how often Iron Eyes are running the poison-based relic, you could honestly just reliably have this on and equipped if you felt like that you were lacking damage in trios. The Frost one can also be really good as well because Frost already debuffs in itself, so it's actually going to be like more than 50% more damage, but it might not be as reliable because Fire does like automatically reset it. So if I were to pick one or the other, it would be Poison. But a damage boosting relic that's going to be even more consistent is going to be just the attack up relics, whether it's physical attack up or any like elemental attack up. That is going to be really good with any specific type of build. For most characters, you typically just need to run physical attack up if you're playing like those melee types of characters. If you are using a spell based build, affinity attack up is just golden. These are definitely going to be the best perks to run with like the Revenant, Duchess, or Recluse, assuming you are going to go all into a spell-based build. Otherwise, just go all into physical damage, unless you have something particular in mind where you might want to stack up on things like just having all magic attack power, which can give you a bit more of a benefit, but I just think having the affinity damage across the borders is going to be more consistent. And for the last perk that I do want to touch on, it's going to be partial HP restoration. This perk is just so good. It's the best perk for survivability by far, in my opinion, because there's so many circumstances where I've just like saved flasks just by having this one relic equipped. And the reason being is because it synergizes perfectly with damage negation at full HP and things like successive attacks as well. Like you just get hit and you can immediately get that health back and save on the flasks because you typically want to be able to always stay at full health even if you have like 90% health. So taking a bit of chip damage is actually going to be a big downside that can be completely counteracted by partial HP restoration. And having these +1 and +2 versions just give you a whole chunk of health back really quickly on one hit, and both of these things can stack as well. Now, from my understanding, the same levels don't stack, but if you have differing levels, like a +1 with a +2, they will stack. Although those don't actually stack with the regular +0 version. We'll just call it that. Like there's plenty of circumstances where you still end up getting one shot and having partial HP restoration is just useless. But there's so many times and so many games that I have where I don't have partial HP restoration, and every single time that I get hit and I feel like I can get that health back and I don't have it equipped, it just feels terrible, and it'd just be way better if I just had it equipped to begin with. So if you're not running any type of survivability or any type of tanking based relics, and you just want to rely on damage negation at full HP, at least run partial HP restoration, because it's definitely going to come in clutch a lot more than you think. Anyway, that is us now done and completed. If there was anything that I did miss, just let me know down in the comments below. If these videos do interest you and you do like them, please do like and subscribe because there will be a bunch more coming out along the way. And definitely do follow me on Twitch because I'm live there every day doing a bunch of just random runs, playing with other people or not. So if you wanted to ask questions, definitely do follow me there or do join the Discord as well. Both of those things will be linked down below. Anyway, catch you guys in the next. See yous.